Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here. So today I have for you guys a updated Yae math guide. I saw quite a few comments in the Tighnari math guide too, where people are interested in the figures for Yae in that Yae Tighnari AggraSpread comp. So this is it. This is Yae's damage in the AggraSpread comp, which we will cover, and also do a comparison. I'll do a recap on the Yae's DPS in a electric charge comp with Kazuha, Kokomi, Raiden, and obviously Yae. And we will also talk about a alternative Yae Dendro comp where it's going to be single Dendro. I'll talk more about that later. And I've actually gone to the extent of going through in great detail Yae's strikes, buffs, and reactions per second breakdown. So it's a bit tedious. I may not do it again, but at least this gives you guys a view of how we're doing the math for Yae in this math guide. Alright. So let's go right in. So before we start, please refer to the Tighnari Math Guide 2 for the details on the comp, the rotation, the energy, etc. Okay, energy requirements of Yae is very low here. It's only 120 ER. 120 ER is if you don't have C4 Dory. If you have C4 Dory, then the 120 ER can be lowered. Next, rotation. Rotation is basically the same as what we have covered in the Tighnari Math Guide 2. I've just listed it here for reference. Okay. Let's go through the interesting one. Yae strikes, buffs, and reactions per second breakdown. So basically, this is how you look at. On the first second, in the first rotation, because we have not set up we have not used our Yae E yet, right? Because first second we are doing Dory Q, so there's nothing here. Okay, but actually from the second rotation itself, you would have your Yae's E carrying over to do strikes here. These are the buffs that are applicable to it, and the reaction that triggers at which specific attack. Okay, so you have the 4 Noblies triggered from Dory's Q, and obviously this fifth second here is the first attack from Yae's E, right? And so forth. You have all the different buffs that are happening at a certain instance, and then you have a case where you have all the buffs. Then one of the buffs starts to expire, for example, 4 Noblies. You have the Yae's Q, what buffs that Yae's Q have, and whether it triggers an aggravate, which is here. And why is it here instead of here? Because the burst animation time. Okay. And likewise, there's an empty period here because right after casting your Yae's Q, your turrets will be gone. You need to recast your turrets, and it takes a bit of time for your first turret to attack. Typically, by the time you lay your third turret, your first turret will attack. And yep, so these are all the buffs being factored in at the per second time. There are natural expiry ending. For example, allergy ends here, allergy starts here and ends here. Okay, resonance is always there because we are constantly doing reactions. And C4 Tighnari, if you know how C4 Tighnari works, you get the first half. Once you get the first half once you use Tighnari's Q. Second half is when you trigger a reaction with his Q. So obviously there is burst animation time. That's why there's 2 seconds of half of Tighnari's C4 Tighnari's buff here. Okay, so this is how it looks like, and obviously the math will be based on this. Otherwise, there's no point for me to do this. So the math will be really based on how many strikes have what type of buffs at what instance, at what second, and how many aggravates there are. And obviously the aggravates will also be based on the buffs, because it applies to aggravate as well. Okay. So like I said, this is later too tedious. I'll probably take a more general approach in future. But given the various levels of EM with the buffs, right, I wanted to do the math as accurate as possible. Because the EM is really dynamically changing in such a comp. Because the way Dendro resonance works, or Dendro teams work, it's really like this. I can't help it. But yeah, I may try to do a more general approach in future, but let's see how that goes. At least for Yae, okay? But no worries, whenever I say a general approach, right? I mean, in the past, I have already been doing the math such that I account for the buffs. It's just that for this is the next level. Okay, so this is the breakdown. Now let's look at her damage, Yae's damage or DPS in AggraSpread comp with the same comp that I've covered in Tighnari Math Guide 2, which is your 3 new characters, Kole, Dori, Tighnari, along with Yae. Before you look at the overall damage, right, let's just look at the different permutation, the stats used. Sorry, this should be a her. Go to team. Yep. So permutation wise, right, I took the opportunity to help myself as well with the math. So the first two permutation are my actual in-game stats. In-game artifacts that have actual stats that I can permutate with. Okay, I can switch around with. So it's also for me to do a comparison to know which is better. And it's good for me to do in the math guide as well because one of it has almost 100 EM. So you know there's some level of EM investment. And the other one only has 21 EM. But in return, you get much higher CR. Although crit damage is slightly lower, but the higher CR means that we have a higher crit value. Okay? And slightly lower attack. But doesn't really matter this difference. Okay. And then we have one that's pure math, where we do a math on us having a lot more EM stats from artifacts, going to the extent of using a EM sense, along with some base EM stats. Okay? So that gives us 287. Yeah, I mean, it's a rough target. You can be 267, you can be 247. But I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to compare here. 100 EM base permutation versus basically more or less 0 and a 200 plus. And then you add on all the different buffs that are happening here. And this is the kind of total EM we are looking at, the permutation that we're comparing against. We have a 300 plus if you don't consider C4 Tighnari, 300 plus versus slightly lower, almost 100 lower. And another one where it's higher is 500 plus. And then you have the C4 Tighnari as well, which brings us to 476, 401, and 687. Now, obviously, when you go more EM, your CRCD is lower. Okay? And my artifact stats is completely maxed out here. It's not like the usual where I leave 5 artifact rows that can go wrong because, like I said, I need to do a fair comparison against my actual artifacts. Okay? So it's a good thing. This math also helped me decide which I'm going for, and I'll show you guys the figures now. Okay, so this is the C0, C1 damage, and then you have C2 all the way to C6. You have R1, R5, obviously using Yae's signature weapon, Kagura's Verity. You have this is the 2TF2 Shime actual, and this is 2TF2 Gladiators actual, and the permuted math I've talked about. So right off the bat, I think you can see, right? This is always better. The 2TF2 Glad is always better. So in other words, high crit is still better. Okay, high crit is still better. But bear in mind this is with C4 Tighnari. Okay, which means that we have we might do the EM stats. Sorry, I forgot to put it down below. We have at least 400 EM at the highest point. Okay, highest point. Not all the time. Remember, we did this, right? So it is not at all instances that we have 400 EM. It's only here that we have 400 EM. So you really don't need to over-invest in EM for Yae. That's what I'm trying to go for here. Because if you notice, the permutation with the higher investment into EM on the artifact stats, this is what you're getting. It's all lower than even the 100 EM investment. And the lowest EM investment with the higher crit stats actually does better. Now this is also because Yae's multipliers are pretty high. Okay. Now difference between these two is not that big. Okay, this is not so bad. But the difference between the best permutation here versus this starts to be bigger. Okay. So outside that the damage is pretty good for off-field character, especially if you consider adding Tighnari's damage. we will have 1.8 million damage, both C6 R5 in the max out kind of scenario. I also don't have R5 by the way. I don't have R5 for Kagura's Verity. I'm not gonna get R5 for Tighnari as well. Unlikely. I've dropped R5 weapons. So 1.8 million damage in a dual DPS comp from two of them, I think it's pretty good. It's really high damage. And like I said, the benefit of this comp is really consistent high damage while also having a high surge in damage when you need it, which is really nice. It's 2 rounds of surge actually in 24 seconds. So now this looks good. Let's talk about Yae's damage. How about versus Yae in an EC comp with Kazuha, Kokomi, Raiden? Because these are the characters that I did the math previously. Okay, whatever I'm using here, it will be the math that I did in my previous Yae math guide. Back in, I can't remember when. Early this year. Yeah, early 2022. Okay, now I just wanted to quickly show what are my Kazuha stats that were used in the math here. What are the assumptions? Okay, and what Kokomi is using. So although this is an EC comp without Bennett, Yae can't really benefit from Bennett since her E doesn't snapshot. In fact, all of these are even better because Kokomi with TTOTM and TTOTS, so Trillion of Dragon Slayer with tenacity. This gives you like what, 68% attack. Yaiden's E also buff Yae's Q. It's like a 20 plus to 30% buff, if I didn't remember wrongly. And you have Kazuha, obviously, who buffs a lot. Okay. And these are the stats that I have. I try to mirror as much as possible, but there's one that's not really relevant in this comparison, and that's a ER sense. Okay, we have the attack sense and the EM sense, which is very similar to what the figures we have here. Okay, now you see the damage is higher, right? I don't know whether we can say it's much higher, but it's definitely significantly higher. There's a distinct difference. 1.12 million versus 8.14 million. And this below here is the percentage difference that you see here. Now there's a bigger gap between the attack damage CD builds versus the EM damage CD builds. So that's one thing for you to consider. If you end up using a EM damage CD, especially if you don't have all the different type of buffs that I'm talking about, because it's not easy to get those buffs, right? You need a C4 Tighnari, you need a C4... Okay, C4 Collate isn't that bad. Eventually you will get there, even if not immediately in version 3.0. But C4 Tighnari, I think most folks wouldn't have it. So there may be some merit in using the EM sense. This comparison here is to show you in terms of max potential when you have a lot more other buffs coming in from other sources other than Yae's artifact stats. This is the type of comparison you will see. Okay, so in other words, right, when you have enough EM, when you have like 400 EM, the attack damage CD build will be good enough. If you can get 400 EM with attack damage CD. Okay, which is what we see here, or here, but whichever the permutation level is at. Okay, so but if you end up having to use the EM sense in order to achieve that 400 EM, it's not the end of the world, because especially if you don't have all those other sources, then it's fine. But I think a 400 EM point is a good place to stop as a target. But without doing the specific math, I can tell you 400 EM, you might actually be better with attack. Because I have already done Yae's math previously, okay? Without Aggravate, without Dendro previously, her attack comp is always doing better than the EM comp. And you see the figure is here. So I'll say don't over invest in EM. It's still better to get an attack sense. And try to get EM sources from other sources, minimally. Eventually you will get a C4 Collate plus at least Dendro Resonance that gives you like what, 100 EM and 160 EM. And don't worry, for the F2P players, I'll talk more about getting other EM sources in alternative Yae Dendro comp, which I think is a very budget option and is a very feasible option for F2P players and most low to spend players as well. I'll talk more about that later. Okay, no worries, guys. I got you covered. So, like I said, this is made from my Yae guides done previously. So talent levels are not exactly matching. You know, you have 186, 111.6, 111.9. But okay, and the reason why is probably because I went with 8. I probably went with 8 instead of 9 because of new weekly boss materials. Most likely, Yae was released together with a new boss and she needs a new boss material. We don't have new boss materials. That many of the new boss materials to immediately get base level 9. That's why I did a permutation based on 8 instead of 9. However, I did do a max potential permutation, which is the 1/12. Okay, so that's why I use this figure to compare versus this figure, because the talent levels are matching. Now, I have used Kazuha so much in my math that I kind of took it for granted how imba he is or how OP he is. So yeah, Yae still does more in the Isekai. Remember in my Tighnari math guide too, I said that Yae will probably do more in the AggraSpread comp. Sorry guys, I'm wrong. I forgot how good Kazuha is. So Yae, just Yae's damage alone, she still does more in her Isekai compared to the AggraSpread. But remember, AggraSpread with Tighnari also has Tighnari contributing a lot of DPS. Now, while there is Raiden in this Isekai, okay, there's Raiden here, but there is no banner of Sarah for Raiden. No banner of Sarah. So Raiden is not going to reach like 1 million damage like Tighnari has at, its high, at both of their highest potential in the specific comps. And can I tell you guys the biggest difference here is actually the Q, Yae's Q damage. Because EM for Yae only increases her E, not her Q. That is the biggest reason for the difference in damage here between these two comps. Her E figures are actually pretty close. But because Q has a difference of 200 to 300k between the two comps, this is more or less the difference between the two comps for the Yae's damage. Now I know there are some folks who say, oh, just drop Yae's Q, don't cast it. Not entirely wrong, but I also don't think that her Q is so bad that you don't cast it, because in the first place, you have to, let me put it this way, okay? You have to replace her turrets. Her turrets last for 14 seconds. You have to replace them. If you already have to replace them anyway, you may as well use Yae's Q. Yae's Q will do about 100k damage in AggraSpread comp. My Yae anyway. In a C6 max out potential permutation. So 100k damage, I think it's still alright. And more importantly, our rotation is already matched nicely in a 24-second rotation. Even if I don't do the Yae's Q, I'm gonna do something else to make it such that it's 24 seconds so that everything rotates perfectly. In terms of Tighnari's ability to reuse his ability twice in a row. Okay, to do his surge in DPS twice in a row. It has to be 24 seconds. If you make it 22 seconds on your second rotation, it will be messed up. You will have to spend a lot more time waiting and trying to get the Tighnari's Q and E ready before you can use it. The cooldown wouldn't match. Okay. Now, if this rotation takes more than 24 seconds, then yes, there may be some merit in dropping Yae's Q. But right now, it's matched perfectly. So, yeah. Now, so I will expect the Tighnari Yae Dori Kole AggraSpread comp to have higher overall team DPS than the Yae Kazuha Raiden Kokomi EC comp. But Yae's damage alone is higher than EC comp. Okay, so this is what I wanted to do, permutate and show you guys the result. Now let's talk about alternative Yae Dendro comp that is less costly than what I have permutated here. Because after all, you guys know I always try to permutate max potential along with C0 as well. But in this case, it's a bit hard for me to exclude C4 Tighnari for C0 C1. Or maybe I should have, but yeah, it just makes the math a lot more complicated in that sense. And it makes it messier when I try to use the same template in future. Yeah. Okay, now let's talk about the alternative Yae Dendro comp. If you do not want to invest in two mains, Yae and Tighnari, because I can definitely understand. I did play around with a Yae F2P account for a few months. Pure F2P account for a few months. Not even Welkin, I think. I actually can't remember. I have not touched the F2P account for very, very long. But anyway, what I'm trying to say here is that I can understand not wanting to invest in two mains in one comp. Unless you're a long time F2P player and you can afford the resources. Or you already have the other character built, for example. Let's say you only want to make it work with one main, Yae. Another option would be Sucrose plus Yae plus Fisher or Raiden and Kole. I mean, obviously Fisher and Raiden is the battery for Yae, and why I'm not using Dory here is because we have Sucrose using TTODS here, which means your Sucrose is going to be the character right before Yae and not your Electro battery. So we need an Electro battery that doesn't read to specifically funnel into Yae, which Fisher and Raiden does the job. Yeah, Fisher and Raiden does this. They don't really need you. They don't really need to be the one right before the character that you're trying to get energy into. Because both their E's are overtime, energy generation overtime. Raiden's energy restoration also is to the entire team while using her Q. So that's that. So Sucrose preferably C6 for the damage bonus. And I'll explain why Sucrose and not Kazuha. Because like I said, it's also about budgeting, right? And for the Dendro, we use the single Kole. Now, since Yae is off-field most of the time, I personally prefer Raiden here to take out the on-field time instead of Fisher. So if you think about it, all of them are off-field. Unless you want to use Sucrose as a driver. I mean, it's doable, definitely. But I do prefer using Raiden if you can afford to put her here. Because Raiden also buffs Yae's Q with her E. And remember what I was saying, right? Yae's Q is the main difference between the EC and AggraSpread. And by doing these buffs, by getting a higher attack buff and damage bonus, as well as Raiden's E buff to Yae's Q, it's going to breach the gap of the Q. Okay? Sucrose is used here instead of Kazuha. Why? Because we want the EM buff to apply to off-field characters. C2 Kazuha requires the character to be on-field in his Q. We can't do that with Yae. Yeah, we can't do that with Yae. Yae is supposed to be off-field after casting her stuff. So yeah, that's the reason why we are using Sucrose. Sucrose condition of giving EM is very simple. One of it is trigger sword to give the 50 EM. The other is just to hit with either her E or her Q to give 20% of EM. And the beauty here is that by having Kole, if you have C4 Kole with allergy, R1 allergy, I know not everyone has them, but I know some folks that do, so let me just cover that. So 160 EM, this 160 EM can be given to Sucrose to be included in her 20% EM. Okay, what doesn't work is Sucrose 20% of Sucrose EM funneling into Kazuha's EM for Kazuha's damage bonus. That doesn't work. Percentage funneling into percentage doesn't work. Flat funneling into percentage works. Okay, so a flat EM buff like Dendro Resonance plus R1 Allergy plus Kole. Oh, sorry. So that's 260 EM, not 160. 260 EM given to Sucrose. Okay. So effectively, what we are doing here in this alternative comp, is we are giving out a Dendro Resonance. Oh, sorry, then there's no Dendro Resonance. What am I talking about? So I was right the first time, 160 EM. Okay. So effectively, we give out Dendro Resonance, we give out C4 Tighnari in return for Sucrose buff, but it's much cheaper because you don't need to get C4 Tighnari and Sucrose buff. If you're a long-term player, you would have your C6 Sucrose by now. Hopefully. So in terms of max potential wise, a C4 Kole with allergy along with a R1 allergy along with a full EM Sucrose plus Childe Tales of Dragon Slayer should provide close to 400 EM to team. So remember what I was talking about earlier? I was saying that 400 EM is a sweet spot to be along with an attack damage CD build. Okay, so this alternative Yae Dendro comp achieves this without having to get a C4 Tighnari. But given that it's a budget comp, you cannot expect that it will do better than a comp with two max potential 5-star characters, right? So Yae's damage will definitely be higher than here. Will be higher here than in Yae Tighnari. It's pretty straightforward, right? Looking at the buffs available. But I'm doubtful you will match overall team DPS. As for EC comp, to be honest, I'm not sure how it will turn out in comparison before doing the math. Another thing to note is that there's no beat search via Tighnari's on-field combo, but this comp requires less investment, and most importantly, it helps in saving for Kusanali. So that's nice, right? It's very nice for F2P players. But that's provided you did manage to get Kole on Tighnari's banner, which is not right before, but the version before Kusanali's. Okay, so that's one thing to consider. But if you already intend to get Kole and still want to try to save for Kusanali, then this may be a comp that you would be interested in. And it's nice because technically speaking, you only need one 5-star character. You can choose not to use Raiden and use Fisher, and then use Sucrose as the on-field, and just do more swerves. Call it enabler or driver for more swerve reactions. Definitely doable. Okay, so let me know in comments if you guys are interested in the math for this comp, and I'll do it if the response is good. I probably need to do a Kole math guide 1 before that, so it's clear why a single Kole should be sufficient in this comp. Alright, so now we come to the TLDR. Yae's damage is pretty good for off-field character in the Kole Dori Tighnari Yae comp. And if you add on Tighnari's damage, you have 1.8 million in the max damage potential, obviously. On C6R5. I myself is not going to get C6R5. The most I go is C6R1 if I do get C6 Tighnari. So this is very nice. This comp has high overall team DPS and also 2 rounds of surge in DPS via Tighnari's actions. Okay, next, comparing against Yae damage in Kazuha, Kokomi, Raiden, Yae EC comp. Yae's damage is higher in the EC comp than the AggraSpread, because of how good Kazuha's buff is, along with Kokomi buffing her, giving her a lot of attack buff with tenacity and TTODS, and you have Raiden buffing her Q and damage as well with the Raiden's E. But overall team DPS should still be higher in AggraSpread because Raiden is not getting Banner of Sarah in this comp. If you want to compare Raiden against Tighnari. And like I said, Tighnari provides a nice search when required, which is very important. I mean, if you think that Ayaka is imba, it's also because of the search concept. If you think that C6 Yelan is imba, it's also because of the search concept. Okay. I mean, mainly due to that. Obviously, there are other factors like Yelan having sustained off-field and Ayaka being able to do like her N2C or N3C combo while during her downtime, stuff like that. So, yep, a alternative comp with solo Dendro, like what I've mentioned here, it looks feasible, but I have to do the math to see where it stands exactly. Let me know in comments if I do see high interest level, I'll do the math. I'll probably try to focus on doing a Kole math guide 1 first. Okay. Instead of going back to Tighnari as well. I mean, there's too many characters. I kind of have to spread my resources accordingly. Yeah. My resources being my time to do the math guides. Okay, so Yae video series, obviously I'm not starting a whole bunch of series per se, but I may do a solo Dendro Yae AggraSpread comp. Like I said, let me know in comments. Alright, so thanks everyone for watching. I hope this has been helpful to you guys in understanding how Yae works in the AggraSpread comp, her performance. More importantly, her performance in the AggraSpread comp versus her EC comp previously. And don't forget that this EC comp is a heavily invested EC comp. You have 4 5-star characters. It's a full 5-star character EC comp. Okay? Yeah. And I also help to think about a alternative Yae Dendro comp that's a lot more friendly on the wallet, a lot more feasible for the bigger player base. So that's that. Alright, if you like the content, remember the video and click subscribe for more. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.